1 John 5:11. And this is the record, that God hath given to us eternal life, and this life is in his Son. King James Version. 1 John 5:11, New International Version, words it as, and this is the testimony, God has given us eternal life, and this life is in his Son. What is a testimony? I believe the most commonly understood and identified testimony is that of conversion, when a person converts into the biblical belief system, specifically the biblical belief system tied to Jesus. But I also believe there can be, in a person's lifetime, numerous testimonies. There can be healing testimonies, testimonies where a person has deeper reverence or understanding of God or his word. There can be testimonies tied to how someone prayed for someone else. Testimonies are stories of triumph, how a person was before their triumph and a person after their triumph. I believe that testimonies, whether it's hearing testimonies, going through testimonies, can deepen a person's faith or understanding of God. And I believe that even so much as hearing a person's testimony can intrigue someone to wanting a relationship with the God that they're hearing someone discuss. So in this particular discussion, I'm going to be talking about testimonies, and especially within the Awakening era, but I won't limit it to the Awakening era. Rather, share testimonies that have been edifying for my life and helpful in my understanding of God. I believe that all over the world there are different people of any demographic that can form a relationship with God, who can become converts to Christ. We may differ doctrinally, we may differ in different vantage points. For example, my specific vantage point is very different from the mainstream sense, but if there's one thing that I believe we can all relate to as Bible believers, is that God had a son, and he sent his son to die on the cross for us. And certain testimonies that validate that point, but in a very extreme capacity, have been so helpful for me in understanding God. For example, I believe I was a teenager when I read about Tortured for Christ. Tortured for Christ is by Richard Wurmbrand. He happens to be the founder of The Voice of the Martyrs. And when I read Tortured for Christ, hearing his testimony, just giving a description, it says, after years of imprisonment and solitary confinement, enduring inhumane torture, Richard Wurmbrand emerges with a powerful testimony of courageous faith. So the book itself is about persecution that this individual went through because of his conversion. And it is so amazing. Everything from, there was mock Bibles that were used to mock the actual scriptures. And that was actually the same scriptures that brought him to Christ. So there's so many beautiful twists and turns and things that really hard to believe, like, wow, God did that for you and you were able to know God in that way. He even shares within Tortured for Christ his testimony of leading many others to Christ. Revolution in World Missions by Dr. K.P. Yohanan is another book I read in my teen years. In fact, I think I read Tortured for Christ and this specific book within days of one another or weeks. And they're very similar. It speaks about believing in God, especially in environments where it may not be as likely or common to. And this specific book captures the missionary Dr. K.P. Yohanan's experience of preaching the gospel throughout India. So, if you want to have more information about these two testimonies, you can maybe check them out at your library, or with Revolution Missions, they actually provide the book for free shipping as well. I remember years ago for Tortured for Christ, that was also a book I obtained for free. I don't know if that's still the same way. That the book Tortured for Christ was eventually adapted into a film, and if you'd like to watch the film, you can register on their website. They provide that for free. Isn't it amazing to see how God can, even in persecuted believers, make himself known and they can share a relationship with him? But what's also interesting are testimonies of people who were in witchcraft or previously involved in the occult. And I actually believe that those testimonies will increase throughout the awakening era. Two testimonies that come to mind for me. One I found just last week, and that specific testimony is presented on Daystar, on their YouTube channel. And it speaks of a woman who was introduced to witchcraft as a child and dedicated to Satan by her father. The woman's name is Sandy Boyd. And she shares how, in a very difficult period of her life, having experienced many paranormal phenomena and just being emotionally and mentally drained from the event, she ended up finding Christ. So if you'd like to see that, it's on the Daystar channel. It's entitled Born into Witchcraft and Satanism, dedicated to Satan by her dad. Here's how Sandy Boyd escaped. And the other testimony that I remember seeing, but this in my teenage years, and then I just got back to it last week, is a testimony by a man named John Todd. And he happened to, just like Sandy, been raised in the occult, taught many of its practices from a very young age, and shares his testimony. He has actually many different testimonies that he shares, not just being part of the occult, but being part of the occult in the secular music industry. I found his testimony from a platform named Tina Golick, and this specific video happens to share his conversion testimony. It's entitled Ex-Satanist John Todd, 3 Signs of a Witch, Spells in Music, Tape 6. I'm so honored to partake in different testimonies because God spoke about in a parable how his people, the people that are covenanted unto himself, they rejected him. And then other people who may not have been those people received the gospel. God is not specific to a demographic. However, he does have a covenanted people, and covenant cannot simply be expelled. It's something that, due to who God is within that covenant, must be fulfilled. And also God promised that with the covenant he had for the Israelites, he was never going to forsake them. Yes, he divorced them for a period, but he promises to renew a connection with them. And I believe that renewal period, which I've termed in different content as the awakening era, is going to happen. I don't think it's something that's been fulfilled. I don't think it's something that can be thwarted, although I do believe there could be paranormal attempts at thwarting it. I think it's something that biblically must be fulfilled. And that can also lead, in a roundabout sense, to testimonies outside the world outside, especially when they see that change. But I also think it's going to lead in an overall sense to the testimony of the people that are Israelite. Joel 2 explains this in depth. Joel 2 I believe, is extremely tied to the awakening. It is the awakening. Joel 2 goes in depth and it speaks about, in a very supernatural, extreme sense, how God is going to make himself known unto his people. Anything from retribution to forgiveness to remembering his covenant for Israelites. Joel chapter 2, and I will specifically start with verse 15. It states, "Blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children and those that suck the breasts. Let the bridegroom go forth of his chamber, and the bride out of her closet. Let the priests, the ministers of the Lord, weep between the porch and the altar, and let them say, Spare thy people, O Lord, and give not thine heritage to reproach, that the heathen should rule over them. Wherefore should they say among the people, Where is their God? Then will the Lord be jealous for his land, and pity his people. Yeah, the Lord will answer and say unto his people, Behold, I will send you corn and wine and oil, and ye shall be satisfied therewith, and I will no more make you a reproach among the heathen. But I will remove far off from you the northern army, and will drive him unto a land barren and desolate, with his face toward the east sea, and his hinder part toward the utmost sea. And his stink shall come up, and his ill savour shall come up, because he hath done great things. Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord will do great things. Be not afraid, ye beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness do spring.
For the tree beareth her fruit.
The fig tree and the vine do yield their strength. Be glad then, ye children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for he hath given you former rain moderately, and he will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain, and the latter rain in the first month. And the floor shall be full of wheat, and the vats shall overflow with wine and oil. And I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten, the cankerworm and the caterpillar and the palmer worm, my great army which I sent among you. And ye shall eat in plenty, and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, that have dealt wondrously with you, and my people shall never be ashamed. And ye shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God, and none else, and my people shall never be ashamed. And it shall come to pass afterward, that I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. And also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out my Spirit. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass, that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord hath said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. The last 3 testimonies I want to share, I found them within the past 2 weeks and conveniently around the same time, so likely days and even at least a week apart between them respectively. And being able to find these testimonies, I believe, was a matter of both convenience and just curiosity. What makes these testimonies especially amazing is how paranormal they get and how supernatural they also get. How these individuals were initiated into their former spiritualities via a generational tie. The title of the video is Ex-Satanist and High-Ranking African Warlock Encounters Jesus. The James Kawaya interview on Prayer Storm TV. The other two videos with Sarah and Gabrielle is entitled From Witchcraft to Worship, A Journey of Redemption, featured on Wumi Bello. The next testimony, and it's in parts, so I'll share part 1, but I recommend watching the entirety of it. It's entitled Interview with an Ex-Satanist, Gabrielle Stevo, on the channel The Blue Pattern. All three of the parties, you've got Uganda represented via James, you've got Angola represented via Gabrielle, and I'm not sure where Sarah said she is from, but they all talk about how these religions they were into were tied to their culture, so it goes into cultural spirituality. But beautifully, the rabbit hole that I went on with these three testimonies was tear-jerking. It was heightening my spiritual understanding of God. It was a lot of things for me. And hopefully it will reveal within you, like, wow, look at how God is moving in these people. Ideally, you will enjoy these testimonies, all of the testimonies that I've shared, and I hope that if you do not have a testimony, these will make you want to have a testimony. That is all I have for this discussion. I'm so, God's willing, looking forward to the testimonies of the awakening era, because there's going to be more. It's not just us coming into conversion. That's the first step. It's us understanding and coming into covenant as God renews the covenant with us in terms of biblical prophecy. So thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for more.